morning, good afternoon, good evening. There are recent Twitter comments by Professor Ibo Mandaza calling on Chamisa to stop using his biblical verses and leave politics because he has got nothing to offer. Has generated a lot of interest. Ever since the end of the elections last year, I think most people had switched off. They were on standby mode. But that Twitter seemed to have reactivated a lot of them. And I think that is good. That is healthy. Because as a nation, we need serious debate. We need to engage people and talk about the problems. The main problem we have in Zimbabwe is the failure to resolve our problems. Last year, Zanu PF was able to blatantly rig the elections, 44 years after independence. We still can't run free, fair, and credible elections. That is an issue that we must discuss and that we must deal with. And the main problem for it is exactly what I was talking about, that people switch off. The minute the elections are over, they switch off. They are now in standby mode. And politicians have exploited the ignorance of the masses. Nothing exemplifies the ignorance of the masses more than the very fact that Chamisa was able to con 2 million people to go and vote because he promised them that Triple C would win big, because he has plugged all the vote-rigging loopholes. I keep repeating that lie because it is an outrageous lie. How anyone could believe such a blatant lie, it beggars belief. In this day and age, how could you believe that? But 2 million people did. And that is the 2 million who went to vote for Chamisa. There were about 4 million in the diaspora who cheered and applauded and even bankrolled those flawed elections. And most of those people, particularly in the diaspora, have got high school qualifications, some of them university qualifications, professors even. That is where our problem is. But I'm glad that Ibo Mandaza's comment has generated, or has at least forced many people to switch back on and start engaging. Here is a video clip of one of the videos that have been circulating on social media, debating these very issues. So let me cue it up. I'll just play a short clip of it.
Thank you once again. Welcome to our main show of the day. This is the one that we call the bulletin. And in this bulletin today, we are going to be talking about the change champion, Nelson Chamisa. Nelson Chamisa, the only selfless and incorruptible leader in Zimbabwe. These are words of Professor Gift Mugano. Family, we've seen the demonic attack that rose right around our country and even from outside, attacking the champion Nelson Chamisa. And we've been doing shows. I did shows, I think 2 shows where we were trying to talk about this issue, addressing the unprecedented attacks that are coming against the champion over the failures of the demonstrations. While, of course, we'll be explaining that was he part of it? Did he ever talk about it? And why should Zanu PF be after him, Muchangwa after him? Everyone wants to align it to him while he's not part of it. He did not contribute anything towards that. But they know the truth. The problem is they know the truth. Even if Nelson Chamisa would say, I've resigned from the Triple C, I'm just somewhere sitting down. They know that if you hear Zimbabweans talking about removing Zanu PF, they know who their leader is. So that's why it's automatic. It doesn't have to be proven that how do you prove that it's Nelson Chamisa or what? How do you prove that Chamisa is still active? They know as long as Zimbabwean people are still politically active and want to remove Zanu PF will know that it's Chamisa. They know. Why are they not blaming Ncube? Why is it that Mchangwa did not come and say the Triple C and Ncube, they are planning something? Never mentioning about Ncube. You're talking about a man who wrote his resignation from the Triple C, and he's somewhere down in his house, in his closet, and he's not saying much except to greet people and say the word of God. But
we'll stop there. Well, it seems to be the gentleman is contradicting himself. On the one breath, he seems to be saying Chamisa is in retirement. On the next breath, he's saying Chamisa is active and he is important in the dynamics of Zimbabwe politics. Well, I think I'll agree with the latter. He is active. Let's be honest here. Chamisa went into a sabbatical when he lost MDC Alliance following the fracas regarding how he had succeeded following the death of the late Morgan Tsvangirai. He went into a sabbatical and staged a comeback. He formed the Triple C. So to think that Chamisa, because he has resigned from Triple C, is no longer politically active is naive, to say the least. He is politically naive. And one of the reasons why Chamisa keeps coming back is that he knows he has got a captive audience, his followers. Last year, when he told them that he had plugged all the vote rigging loopholes, they believed him in their millions. That is what I call a captive constituency. Our problem, our political problem, arises from that very fact. Democracy works when you have got an educated, knowledgeable, and diligent electorate. What we have here is an electorate that has got the propensity to have this personality cult mentality. To be quite honest, Chamisa is not the only one who has had this kind of followers. Soon after independence, Mugabe was held in such high regard that criticizing Mugabe was considered sacrilege. You risked being beaten up if you criticized Mugabe. For years after independence, even when we started having the Willowville motor scandal, or the corruption started getting rampant, people will say, no, it's not Mugabe's fault. It's the problem with the ministers. They would not want to admit that Mugabe was the man who was appointing those ministers. In some cases, reappointing them, even when they've been proven to be corrupt and incompetent. When Mugabe lost his pedestal, in came Tsvangirai. Many people, even today, still want to consider Tsvangirai an iconic leader. Why? Beggars belief. Beggars belief because we have got to look at what has happened. What is the primary purpose of the opposition in Zimbabwe? We have to define that because that is the starting point. People elected the MDC in the late 1990s when the party was formed because they believed the party would deliver the democratic changes necessary to stop Zanu PF breaking the elections. The party itself's name was derived riding on that very issue, the movement for democratic change. And yet, MDC has failed to implement even one democratic change, even during the GNU when they had the golden opportunity to do so. Why? I think the reason is because they're breathtakingly incompetent and corrupt. And the main problem we have got an electorate that has got this personality cult mentality that once they've raised a leader to be their leader, they'll follow him blindly. Here is a video clip, no doubt dug by somebody from the archives, in what I'm sure they hoped was to prove how popular Nelson Chamisa is. Well, that explains a lot. It is true that MDC, CCC have no plan. They failed to implement even one democratic reform during the GNU when they had the golden opportunity to do so. Towards the end of the GNU, when SADC realized that no meaningful reforms had been implemented, they tried to get the elections, the 2013 elections, postponed, arguing that we must at least implement the electoral reforms. They called a special SADC summit in Maputo in June 2013. where they told Morgan Tsvangirai and company to their faces, if you go into these elections without reforms, you will lose. The elections are done. Zanu PF is going to rig them. Zanu PF appeared to agree at the summit that they will postpone the elections. By the time they got back home in Zimbabwe, they changed their mind. They presented a very convincing argument. Patrick Chamisa, who was the Minister of Justice and Parliamentary Affairs, called a press conference when he got back home, at which he told the members of the diplomatic corps and the press who were there that they don't see any need for Zimbabwe to postpone the 2013 elections because there are no outstanding reforms to be implemented. He, as Minister of Justice and Parliamentary Affairs, can say with confidence that there are no reform proposals that are still to be implemented in Parliament. Indeed, in the 5 years of the GNU, not even one reform proposal was submitted by the opposition. So why should they postpone elections to implement reforms when there's not been even a reform proposal submitted? So our friend Chamisa, he was boasting that he has no plan, but he was actually telling the truth. MDC-CCC have had no plan whatsoever. That is the reason why they have not implemented even one token reform in 24 years. Not even one reform proposal was submitted. They have no plan. What the people of Zimbabwe must now ask themselves is that while they have risked livelihoods, limbs, and over 500 people were killed in the 2008 elections alone, to elect the opposition who will bring about democratic changes, they now have got to realize and accept the political reality that the individuals that they have elected, while they put their names forward, had absolutely no plan or any intention of implementing any reforms. And this is why in 24 years they've not even submitted a reform proposal. Chamisa may be boasting that I have no plan, but he's telling the truth. The people themselves must now ask themselves, after 24 years of waiting for the democratic changes, how long are they expected to keep waiting? Because I can tell you now, Chamisa has no plan. While he is taking full advantage of the very fact that Zimbabweans out there have not taken the trouble to understand what is it exactly you want the opposition to do. They have got this personality cult mentality. Once they've elected a leader, they'll follow him blindly. Unfortunately, that is what is undermining our hopes of getting meaningful change in Zimbabwe. Because following somebody without a plan, we even boast about it that he has no plan, is insanity. That is insane. 24 years, including 5 in the GNU, not even one token reform implemented. And you still want to continue following such a leader. Well, if you do, you deserve to suffer. As much as Chamisa is resigned from his Triple C, we know from the past that he's just marking his time. In a few months' time, you stage a comeback, form another party, and promise his brain-dead followers that this time he's going to win. And they will believe him. And they'll participate in the 2028 elections, giving Zanu PF legitimacy. And we'll be back where we are here today. This is the individual who has no plan. He has no plan to stop Zanu PF rigging the elections. That is one thing we can be certain of. And he has been participating in these flawed elections, knowing fully well that participating in them will only give Zanu PF legitimacy. But he will continue doing it. As long as he gets what he wants. This is the problem we have in Zimbabwe. I'm glad that this debate is really heating up, because we need that debate. We need to engage Zimbabweans out there. We need them to be asking themselves, what is it you expect from the opposition? If you expect them to implement democratic reforms to stop Zanu PF rigging the elections, well, Chamisa has told you he has no plan. And it is true, he has no plan. This is why in the 24 years, including 5 in the GNU, he has failed to implement even one token reform. And if you think he's going to do it now, I honestly think you're being very naive and totally dishonest with yourself. This is a serious debate that Zimbabweans should have been holding a long time ago. I'm glad we are holding it now. I'm glad a number of Zimbabweans out there, we had already switched off to standby mode soon after the elections, have switched back on. But while you're on, let's discuss about this. What is it you expect the opposition to do? In my view, you want the opposition to implement the democratic reforms to stop Zanu PF rigging the elections. They've failed to do so in 24 years. They have no plan to do it now. All Chamisa and company are doing are playing to the gallery, waiting for the opportunity to convince you that they will win the elections without reforms, for the sake of winning the few gravy train seats, and it's business as usual. I'll give the last word to Dr. Nevers Mumba. He was the chairperson of the SADC election group, election observer mission. And this is what he is advising the people of Zimbabwe to do before the 2028 elections.
Well, thank you so much. First of all, let me be clear that the changing of any dynamic or situation in any of our African countries is a preserve of the citizens of that country, in this case, the Zimbabwean people. An election observation team goes there to support the process by observing and being able to release a statement of our observations that, for instance, in Zimbabwe, we raised several issues of transparency and also the independence of the Electoral Commission and things which happen in many other countries, But at the end of the day, once we produce the report and make it available to the Zimbabwean authorities and eventually to the Zimbabwean people, it really remains the preserve of the Zimbabwean people to fight for the freedoms that they need themselves and to correct those issues that have been observed. The reason why we have multiple observation missions is to ensure that, there is a comparison, taking place between the SADC report and the European Union report, the African Union report. And then they can see that those issues that repeat themselves in all these reports, it's up to the Zimbabwean people. And this is where I appeal to all political leaders, not only in Zimbabwe, especially the elections that are coming in Mozambique, that are coming in South Africa, in DRC. We have to make up our minds that, look, at the end of the day, once the people in the country are given an opportunity to monitor the elections, because they also monitor, it starts not during the day of the elections. They must make sure that the constitutional lacunas that can affect a good election are dealt with months before the election. And they must fight to ensure that there's a level playing field. They should never wait for the time when the election is taking place. They must also insist that the electoral commissions and the governments in those countries abide by international norms in holding democratic elections. And this fight must be more vicious before the election comes.
What I can tell the people of Zimbabwe with absolute 100% certainty is that Nelson Chamisa has absolutely no plan to get any of the reforms implemented. He has no intention, he has no plan for that. All he is waiting for is to mobilize his base. And he knows that he has got supporters who are ignorant, naive, and gullible to the point they will believe anything that he tells them. He will tell them that his new party, the Blue Train, as it's sometimes called, is going to win the elections with no reforms, because no doubt he'll come up with yet another idiotic lie of how he has plugged the vote rigging loopholes, and it will win big. They will believe him. They will participate in those elections. Trust me, if people participate in the 2028 elections in the same millions that participated last year, SADC will not deny Zanu PF political legitimacy. Because if you are SADC, you ask yourself, if millions of Zimbabweans are happy participating in a flawed election, who are we to say you should not participate? They will face that problem again come 2028. While you are switched on I seriously think you should review what exactly is it you want the opposition to do. What is it exactly you want Chamisa to do? And stop following blindly. Because I can rest assure you, Chamisa has no plan. As much as you would wish him to have a plan, he has no plan. I think we need to grow up on that point. After 24 years, 5 of which in the GNU, he has failed to implement even one token reform because he has no plan. He never had a plan. Change does not come without planning for it, without working for it. All Chamisa wants to do is to be president. And he's hoping that the people of Zimbabwe will suffer to the point where they can't endure it anymore. They will go then on the street and push for change. His only plan is to sit and wait. He is not going to do anything else. He's going to just wait. By this time, we did not elect Chamisa to sit and do nothing. We elected him to implement democratic reforms, to change the regime. Because in fact, he's not only doing nothing, he's participating in flawed elections to give Zanu PF legitimacy, to perpetuate the suffering. If that is the plan you elected him to carry out, then you should not be disappointed. Thank you very much for those of you able to join me this evening, and have a good day.